and welcome to this Tinkershop tutorial. My name is Martin from the Innisfil Idea Lab and Library, and in today's video I'm going to give you an introduction to the Python programming language. Python is a really great language, especially if you're completely new to programming. And typically how you would get started with Python is download it from python.org, install it on your operating system, and then you would also need to download a code editor or IDE. And that process will be a little bit different depending on what operating system you're using. So I decided let's just skip all that and we can use a virtual environment. So this website, glitch.com, provides you a virtual environment for your programming projects. It is geared a little bit more towards web development, but it comes with Python already installed. It has a virtual terminal and code editor. So it has everything we need to get started creating Python projects without having to set up a local environment on our computer. So head on over to glitch.com and you can sign up for a new account if you'd like. That way you can save your projects. But if you just want to get started and not worry about that, you can just click on New Project. And right now there's really just three options. They're all kind of starter templates, mostly geared towards web applications. And so we're not going to make a web application. We're not going to utilize a lot of what this comes with, but that's okay. These are our options. So you're just going to click New Project and click this first option, Hello Web Page. Alright, so when you create a new project, it brings you to a page like this. You can see in the top left, you get an auto-generated project name. You can rename this, but it does have to be unique across glitch.com. So you have to pick something that no one else has picked. I'm not going to bother changing the name. And then on the left-hand side here, you have the list of files in your project. So similar to like a folder on your desktop, all of our files in our project folder are listed on the left-hand side here. And then on the right, we get a preview of that file, or we can view the contents of it. So there's a README that's like a markdown about Glitch, and you can see it generated an index.html file and a JavaScript and CSS file because this is the web page template. And again, they don't have a basic Python project template or a completely blank template. So it auto-generates these files, and we're not going to use them because we're not creating a web page. So we can just ignore these, or you can delete them. It doesn't matter to me. The other thing that we're going to be utilizing in this tutorial is the terminal. So if you're used to Windows, you might know of like command prompt. It's just a terminal window that you can use to type out text commands that your computer will execute. So you can like launch programs and run different tasks from the terminal. On Mac, it's just called the terminal, as well as Linux. So you're going to go down under Tools and then click on Terminal. Alright, and we can type in different terminal commands. What we're going to do is we're going to launch Python. So you're going to just type in Python 3 into the terminal and press Enter. And so now we've opened Python and we can start writing code. So let's just go over some basics. easy thing to do is printing things into the terminal. So you can type in print and then a set of open and close brackets. So this is the print function in Python. And basically it'll print out into the terminal whatever you put inside these brackets. And we're just going to print some words to the page. We're going to type in hello world, just like that. And you'll notice I put these words, this string of letters, into single quotations. And that just tells Python that this is a string of data, so a string of letters and characters. So there's 3 types of data in Python. There 3 main types. There's strings, which are basically just words or a collection of numbers, characters, and letters. And so when you're creating a string or printing out a string, you need to put it in quotations so that Python knows that this is string data. So we're just going to type in our words into this print function and press enter. And would you look at that? It just prints out that string onto the terminal. Okay, so that's pretty easy. The other thing you can do with Python is math. So I can if I just type in like 9 plus 1 and I hit enter, we get 10. If I can do multiplication, let's just do 8 times 8, we get 64. We can do division, so 10, and then for division we do / 10 divided by 5, we get 2. And of course you can do subtraction. 8 minus 3, we get 5. Okay, so those are working with 2 types of data. So strings, which are just like words, and numbers, which we can do math on. The other really important thing that you'll use a lot is something called variables. So a variable is just a container or kind of like a code word for a piece of data. For instance, if I create a variable called name, and so you create a variable by just typing in the name of the variable, and then an equal sign, and then the value you want to assign that variable. So our name variable, I'll set it equal to my name, which is a string, so I put it in quotations, and I'll press enter. Okay, so this created a variable name, and we set it equal to Martin. Now if I print just the name variable, okay, it'll automatically just put whatever the value we've set to this variable into where we put name, where we're calling the variable. So we press enter and it prints out Martin. If I change the value of our name variable, so I'll set it equal to George, and then we do the same thing, print name, it'll print out George because that is the value we've given to the name variable. And what you could do is print out something like hello, and then a space. And so we've typed out a string, and then we'll just add on the name variable to that string. And this is called concatenation. So concatenate our name variable onto this string here, and we do that by using the plus symbol, and then our second piece of data, we'll press enter, and we get hello George because it added those 2 strings and joined them together as one. And you can do the same with numbers. So if you make a variable, let's just call a is equal to 10. So we created an a variable equal to a number. It's not in quotations, so it's a number, meaning we can do math with it. So a is equal to 10 and b is equal to 5. And then you could do a plus b, and it'll give us the value of a, 10, plus b, which is 5, that's 15. And you do a times b, and we get 50. So yeah, that's a good rundown of working with numbers, variables, and using the print function. Now, this is all great to learn some basics, just writing our Python in the terminal here. But typically what you would do is write out our code up here in a Python file, and then go down to the terminal to execute it, rather than typing it all out like this. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to exit out of Python by typing exit, open and close bracket, and we go back to the terminal, and then we can actually close the terminal for now. Alright, so we'll create a new Python file. So go over here to your file list and click on new file, and then we need to type in a name for our file. So this program is just going to be a simple kind of greeting program, similar to what we were doing in the terminal, but we'll jazz it up a bit. So we're going to type in hello.py for the file name, and the .py is just the file extension for Python files. So we click add this file, and there we go. It's now listed in our list of files, and we have a blank slate to write our code. So this program is going to ask the user for their name, and then prompt the user to input their name. We're going to store that in a variable, and then spit out a custom greeting using that user's name. So this is how it's going to work. We're going to print out what's your name. So we're going to ask the user for their name. Now you'll notice here, remember we're using single quotes to open and close our string. And because there's a single quote within our string in the word what's, that it closes out that string prematurely. So what we want to do is tell it to, we still want it to include that apostrophe within the string, but don't close out the string. So what you can do is use a backslash in front of that character, and it will escape that character and continue the string, and then we close it out here. So let's go ahead and just launch this into the terminal. You'll actually notice you don't have to save anything. Glitch will just auto save as you're working, so that's really great. So we go down to tools and terminal, and to run this file we have to type in Python 3 and then the name of our file. So hello.py, and enter, and you can see it says what's your name, and then that's the end of the program, so it exits out of Python. So it's doing exactly what we want it to so far. So now we want to get the user's name, and so we can do that with the input function. So this is just another built-in Python function, and this will prompt the user to input something into the terminal, and then if we want to store that, we'll have to store it in a variable. So we'll get their name with this input, and we'll create a variable called name and set it equal to an input. So now we'll have the name variable based on whatever they type in, and then we can print out our custom message. So we'll say print hello, and then we want to add the name. So we can type in hello name, and then maybe we'll add in exclamation mark. Let's say it's nice to meet you. And you'll notice here, because of the apostrophe, we have to escape that, so it includes it all in this string. And so it should say hello, whatever their name is that they input here, and then it should say it's nice to meet you. So let's give this a shot. So we'll type in Python 3, whoops, hello.py. Alright, so it says, what's your name? I'm going to type in my name, press enter, and it says, hello Martin, it's nice to meet you. Now if we want to run that again, and you'll notice if I just push the up arrow on my keyboard, it cycles through the last command that you put in the terminal. So rather than typing that all out, I can just push up arrow and then enter. Alright, so it says, what's your name? This time we'll say George. Hello George, it's nice to meet you. Okay, so pretty simple program, but now we've learned a little bit more about working with strings and escaping characters. We're using the print function, concatenating some strings together, and we learned the input function and assigning that input to a variable. So next, we'll create another fairly simple but perhaps more useful program. Alright, so in our next project, we're going to build out a simple sales tax calculator. So you're going to click on New File and create a new file called tax.py. And the first thing we're going to need to do is create a variable for our tax rate. So type in tax rate and set it to whatever the sales tax is where you live. I think mine is 13%. And you'll notice you can't have spaces in a variable name, so I use an underscore here. And so the next thing we're going to need to get a price from our user. So we'll print out to the terminal, enter a price, and then we'll gather the price in a variable and set that equal to a user input. So our new price variable is equal to an input, and then we can calculate the tax on that price. So create a variable called tax and set that equal to tax rate times the price. And then let's just test that out and print out the tax to the screen. So just to see that everything we've done so far is working. So in the terminal, type in Python 3 tax.py. Tells us to enter a price. So type in any number. Okay, and it didn't work. And we get our first error. So this is great. This is what an error looks like. It tells us that our error occurs on line 7 in our tax.py file, right here where we're calculating the tax and assigning it to the tax variable. And so it tells us the type of error. It says can't multiply sequence by non-int type float. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, there's different types of data in Python. of course, we know there's strings and there's numbers, and there's actually two types of numbers. So integers, or int, are whole numbers, and a float is a number with decimals. So up here, this tax rate would be a type of float. And it's saying here you can't multiply a sequence by non-int of type float. So non-int being non-number. And so it's talking here, it's saying that we're multiplying a float value by something that is not even a number. And that's because our price is gathered by a user input. And the input function only takes in a string. So even if the user types in numbers, it's gonna be a string, not a true number that we can run like math on, because the user could type in anything, so it's always gonna store that as a string. Okay, so our price is gathered by the input and it's a string. We can't do math on that. So what are we going to do? Well, there's an easy built-in function in Python that lets you convert a string to a float, and that is the float function. So just type in float and open and close brackets, and then what happens is whatever you put into these brackets, it converts to a float. So let's take our input and wrap it in this float function. And so it'll take that input, but it'll be converted into a float. And so when we run the math here, we should get no problems. So let's run our code again and see what happens. It should be fine. So type in a price. Okay, so we typed in the price and it gave us the tax. So no problems now, but let's type in our print statement, type in tax, like that, and then add our tax on. Just so it makes a little bit more sense. It's not spitting out a number, it's saying your tax is whatever we get. So let's try this again. So type in a price. Okay, so we're getting another error here after we added this string into our print statement. And in the error type, it's saying can only concatenate string, not float, to string. That's what str means, string. So what's happening here is our tax, remember, our tax is a float because it's the result of multiplying two floats together. And we're trying to concatenate or add that onto this string here, and it's saying you can't do that. It has to be, you can only concatenate a string onto another string. So luckily, similar to this float function, there is a string function that will convert a number into a string. So just type in str and then put our tax variable into the string function, and it'll convert that into a string, and then it should have no problem concatenating that onto this other string here. So let's go ahead and try that. We'll run our code again, enter a price. All right, so that works out fine. One thing we might want to do is round this number here, our tax, because usually you would only want to put the first two decimal points in a price. So let's go ahead and just round this to the nearest 2 decimal points, and we can do that in the tax variable here. We'll wrap this whole number in a round function. So if we type in round and we pass in the result of this calculation, now Forgot the D there. Now the round function actually takes in two values. So the first is the number that you want to round, and then you put a comma, and then the second piece of information it needs is how many decimal points do you want to round to. So in our case, it'll just be 2, so we'll put in 2. And so let's try this out again. Just run our Python program, type in a number, and there you go. We get our tax, and then it's nicely rounded just to 2 decimal points. It's a lot nicer looking. Let's add in a dollar symbol right here just to make it look a little nicer. And then just to separate this, let's just print out kind of like a line, just like that. And we'll put that before and after our kind of little receipt here. And we run that again. It's just formatted kind of nicely now. So let's build this out into kind of a more complete receipt where we'll not only display the tax, but the subtotal and the total, which will be the price plus the tax. So right here, we'll print out, write another print statement, and we'll just print out the subtotal. So we'll type in subtotal, and we'll just add on the price, and we'll have to convert that to a string. So we'll wrap that in a string function. Okay, so our subtotal is just the price we get from the user, then our tax, and then lastly we'll print out the total, which we'll have to calculate here. Create a variable called total and set that equal to the price plus the tax. And then we may need to round this as well. So let's just wrap that in a round function as well and set that to round to 2 decimal points. So now we have our total variable here. We can include that in our receipt. So we'll print, we'll put that as the last item. So we'll say print total $, and then we'll add in our total and wrap it in a string function because we have to convert that into a string as well. Okay, so let's try this out and it should work fine. So Python 3 tax.py, we'll enter a price, and there we go. We get a nicely formatted receipt with our subtotal, tax, and our grand total, and we've kind of formatted it nicely. So that concludes this introduction to the Python programming language. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Obviously, this is just scratching the surface of what is possible with Python, but I hope you gained a good sense of some of the fundamentals, and we can build on that in future videos when we build some pretty cool and interesting projects. So stay tuned for future videos. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.